All right, so we'll stick with the process that we've done. I think I know Hernandez and Burke has now done a couple of these actually in the last week and a half, so you guys are familiar. But we'll have a time system. I am going to record this with the Google Glass, so if you are uncomfortable with that, let me know. I'll turn it off. But just testing it out for my own nerdiness to see how it goes. And Buck Institute of Education is also interested in our project tuning, so I thought this might be a way to share an example of our project tuning. So they're quite intrigued by what we're doing. But enough of that. We need to focus on this project at task. And so I'm going to give you 5 minutes to talk about your project, your overview, thoughts, process, and then anything that, if you have a specific question you want us to focus on, we found that really helps with the group to kind of to narrow down on that as opposed to wide open. And I'm sure you might have multiple questions, but make sure you get those expressed so we can wrap our minds around it. And we'll give you 5 minutes to share out everything that you've got, what you plan on doing. Okay? And we'll go ahead and start now.
Well, welcome. I don't know all of you, but if I've never worked with you or talked to you before, I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're taking time to be here to hear about my project idea, which the goal is to make as awesome as possible. So I think it'd be good to start right now with the big question. This is what I need the most help with right now for my project. It's how can I help my students feel compelled to own this project? I think that I have a project that has a lot of potential that, as for me, I'm really excited about it. But because I'm excited about it doesn't mean an 8th grader in my class is going to feel excited by it. And that's what I really want to have happen. So I'm really glad that you are all here to say, hey, I'm an 8th grader. Would I be interested in doing this at all? And if you're not, how can we make it where you would be interested in working on this project? So then the slightly smaller questions to think about today. How can I add bite or clarity to my driving questions, drive them home a little bit more, make them a little bit more provocative? And how can I have students work in a group to produce a documentary while not assessing them as a group? Those are smaller questions, but the big one's right up top. So my project title is They Can't Do That, Can They? And in parentheses I wrote, should they? I think that's implied. I don't know if I want to add it to my title. It's really, that makes it longer and it might be too long. But what I really want to look at is the digital world that we live in and how freedom and security is balanced in that world. We all have digital footprints. We exist as a real human being, and we exist online, and people can learn about us online. And what I hope to have happen is have my students, my classes, explore how their online identities is it an accurate representation of who they are? How can their online identity, their digital footprints, affect them down the road, looking at colleges, looking at job prospects? Because I think there's a lack of awareness about how decisions we make right now can affect our future. And I hope to explore that with my students. Why do this project, a rationale? When I make projects or units, I try to think it out and try to rationalize it. So this is just me free thinking, but we live in a digital connected world. Many people do not understand or consider the implications of how their digital footprints can affect future possibilities or pose challenges to a balance between freedom and security. Which is more important, freedom or security? What sacrifices are we willing to make to be more secure or free? How much of our future should be shaped by our online choices today? It is imperative that students are able to raise awareness about these issues for themselves and others to be informed participants in our democratic society. So that's the goal right there. We want to raise awareness about these issues so that students can understand what the choices they make now, how it could affect them, and as they go on to be the leaders of our country, our world, hopefully they'll be able to be more aware of what that means. Project goals, raising awareness about current issues, raising awareness about digital footprints, helping students think critically about the balance between security and freedom, and then it's more of a research background, using background information to explore current issues, curate and gather information for the public. I hope to use the medium of a documentary. I love research, and I think research gets a bad name. Like if I say research, a lot of times I think students are like, oh, and they think of encyclopedias, and I have to go write a 5-page paper about whales. For me, research is everything. It's having a good question and trying to find answers. It's what makes school comes to life, and I hope that giving students a camera and saying, yeah, we're going to go do research online. We're going to look through books. But then we're going to get you out in the community asking people about these issues, about digital footprints, about security. What freedoms do you value most? What are you willing to give up? I hope to make research more of a process of answering important questions than an assignment from a teacher. Driving questions for content inquiry. So again, these are what are going to guide the instruction, what I teach in class, what we explore together. How might security measures affect personal freedom? I've got a little bit of a history background. Our world history is rife with examples of a balance between security and freedom. Pearl Harbor's attacked. Is it justifiable to intern a bunch of our citizens and put them into internment camps or not? What do you do in this war of terror today? So the balance between security and freedom is important, and I think it's worth thinking about and coming up with our own opinions on what's more important or how can they relate with each other.
You get about 30 seconds or so. Just
okay, yeah. Then there are a bunch of skills that mainly revolves around research. This project is a research project. It'll be split between, of course, writing a paper, not a typical paper though, doing background research, and then using what we gather from that in real community interviews with people around our questions about this digital footprint and how might this affect our futures.
All right, I'm going to stop you there. This we can
yep.
get going. So a lot to think about there. So the next step here is clarifying questions. These are brief factual questions, thanks to clarify stuff that you have heard, that he shared. The next step beyond this is deeper probing questions. So if you have a question that's going to require, or you elicit maybe a longer response from him, just kind of wait until that next part. But this part here is just quick little questions that he can answer very quickly to clarify anything that he suggested. And I guess since there are a lot of new people in here, a couple things to remember, kind of share the air. And sometimes the quietest people have the biggest ideas, the most powerful, so don't be afraid to share. And as we go through all these steps, probably the biggest thing is try not to weave in advice in your questions. Save that for the discussion piece where we can share out all our ideas that we have. So we're going to go just 3 minutes on clarifying questions. And we'll go ahead and start that now.
First of all, I love the project. I love the idea. It's very relevant, very important. What about products? So you said a paper for sure, and it's a documentary also. So some sort of a video thing, collaboration.
Yeah, exactly. I hope that the written research that we do, the materials that we gather as research, can be presented, organizing with a paper, but then also as more of a documentary. So combining the research with interviews with real people.
Just the two things?
Yes.
Can I ask what issues, I don't know if it's clarifying or probing more, but what issues did you have in mind, I guess, when you were brainstorming that you want them to raise awareness about?
Yeah, I had a bunch in mind, but I really zoomed in on just one because I want to try to keep it smaller. If students want to go in different directions, I'll give suggestions and leave it open. But the focus will be about the digital footprint and how our online activities today will affect job and college. Yeah.
What is? Oh, go ahead.
Is there an interview involved with this project?
Absolutely, yeah. We're definitely going to be practicing and learning interviewing skills as a class, and then hopefully for our documentaries as well. I think it's difficult to do quality interviews, and it's worth practicing how to ask good questions.
What's the timeline of this project?
About a quarter.
How many people are you thinking in a group for documentary?
I was envisioning 2 to 3.
Okay.
Will students be required to go outside the building for interview? Or if they find people inside the building or no?
You know, I haven't
outside contacts or inside
contacts. Right, I haven't thought about
guess.
it explicitly, but my first gut reaction is yes, they should be required to go outside the building.
Okay.
If we decide it'll be an issue, then I can change it, but that's my gut.
Mm-hmm.
How will the groups be chosen?
Great question. In my perfect world, I would love to have someone who either has a video camera or is really good with editing, paired up with someone who maybe doesn't have the material. That way everyone will have access to a camera. I don't know if it'll work out that way, but my number one priority will be making sure that the groups of 2 to 3 students, each group will have access to a camera and at least one of the people in the group will be familiar with that name.
Have you studied your digital footprint?
I have, yeah. Yes, I have. And it's very interesting what you can find from a Google search and then combing through social media. And yeah.
Those are our 3 minutes. So that went really well. Some good questions there. Moving on to more probing questions, things that a little bit deeper, more involved type question that we have. Probably, as some of you already heard me say a million times, this is probably the hardest part, to not offer advice in disguise as the process goes, but just to continue to dig deep on ideas or questions that we have. So just kind of think about your question first and try not to weave the advice piece in. We're going to have the next section, we can share all our ideas, and I'm sure we probably all have a lot right now. But now this is still to help him kind of piece through his project. We'll go 5 minutes on this one, and we'll go ahead and start that now.
In the end, what are you going to do with the documentaries? Are they going to show them to the rest of the school? What's the plan?
Right now, the plan is just moved here from Utah, so I was thinking about Sundance Film Festival. So I would love to have a film festival where students invite parents in. These are going to be, I'd imagine it'll be shorter videos, like a good 10 minutes. Nothing 20, 30, 40 minutes long, unless they want to go above and beyond. But that way parents can enjoy 2, 3, 4 videos, and I want to have that film festival atmosphere. But here's the research that we've done. Maybe here's some popcorn. Let's go enjoy this. So I'm imagining Bettendorf Middle School Film Festival. Maybe we'll come up with a better name than that. I bet the students come up with a way better name than that. But I love a celebration, a film festival.
What do you think the students will learn if they do a documentary versus if they do some other type of presentation?
Yeah, it's all about research, and that was such a good question, because I've noticed as an English teacher that whenever we've done research activities, I get instant glazed look. And so I'm like, how can I make research exciting for students? So when I think about what students are going to learn at the end of this, specifically, I hope that students will. I'm looking at the bottom of my sheet right now. I want to make sure I read this instead of going off the cuff. But it's informational writing and creating, which is a big part of English standards. Finding information, organizing it, sharing it well. Conducting the research process, answering self-generated questions, gathering relevant information, and then presenting them logically and using multimedia. So those are the standards I hope students will learn. What that looks like is being able to answer our own questions, tell the source reliable or not, and then figuring out how to weave it together to tell a story. So it's gathering information and then sharing it out to tell another story.
So since this is a whole quarter long, how do you think that you're going to keep the students involved in wanting to do it throughout the entire quarter?
Another great question, because if we do this every day for 9 weeks, I can, even if it's the best project ever, blaze that board. What I hope to have happen is that we don't do it every day for 9 weeks. I hope to have it set up, well, I do have it set up right now, where it will be 2 to 3 times a week. We check in and have work periods. As an English teacher, I'm fortunate enough to have 2 class periods to work with my students. So where one period could be working on a reading workshop or a writing workshop, we could then take the next 40 minutes. All right, on Wednesday, you're going to have 40 minutes. Similar, I think, to what Mrs. Gilmore had with her science project, things to work on and think about, and then this is what we're going to work on in class on this day. So I hope to keep the momentum going. It will be something we visit and go back to and plan out versus something we do every day.
What's your launch for this project? How are you going to make it shine right from day one?
Right from day one, I am going to have Officer Bennett come in and ask to go through all of my data and check it out to make sure that I am good enough. He's got a just cause to go through my material and make sure that everything's up to clear. So we've talked about this a little bit in my classes, and my students seem to think that authority going through their social media should never, ever happen, period. So I think that will be a good scenario to look at.
Not that the grade or points are the most important thing, but have you thought about checkpoints maybe throughout that quarter, just for holding students accountable that they are working on what their tasks are for the project?
I have, and checkpoints are very important. What I started with is saying, okay, I started with on this day I would like to present our documentaries, and then I started going backwards. So what do we need to do? And I have this on a different sheet of paper that I didn't hand out because it would have been 7 sheets of paper, and you don't need that much. It would be craziness. But just an idea of what I had in mind. The original deadline I have to push back because of the snow days, and because I haven't launched it yet. I want to do that now. But, so starting with sharing the project, going back to revising the clips, editing final edits, getting last-minute footage. I'm going backwards from the end to the beginning, writing scripts, transcribing interviews, researching and gathering interviews. The idea of an A and B roll. You know, what do you need for footage, and what could you use for pictures to take place in this documentary? A lot of times it's hard to get footage, so how can you fill the gaps? Editing techniques. How to do interviews is going to be a huge part of this. How to do research, what sources are good. So I do have an outline from the end to the beginning.
All right, those are 5 minutes. So we'll move into discussion here. You don't actually have to scoot back, but for this time we are not talking to him. We're just pretending he's not in the circle. He's just going to sit, listen, and take notes. And this is our opportunity to have a discussion as if he wasn't here, even though I know he's right there. Talking about things that we like, concerns, issues, advice, anything that we have. And I think this is the time where anybody who's been to the project tuning gains the most information and probably oftentimes walks from this point out feeling probably a little overwhelmed, which is, in my mind, I think a good thing of a good project tuning. So let's start with the good, and then just discuss from there things we see, maybe red flags, suggestions, ideas, whatever we have, and try to give him as much as we can. And we'll go 8 minutes, and we'll go ahead and start now.
I see there's a question here you posed about how do you produce documentary and not assessing the group. So I don't know how many people are actually going to be in that group, but rules I think would be awesome, whether it's an editor.
Yeah.
And I know you guys, when you did the science thing, how did you guys feel about that application process? I mean, something like that might be beneficial too.
The fact that we had to, figure out what we wanted to do, and then so like I was a supervisor, for example, and then we picked our group without names, so based just off of what their information, what their application looked like, and we formed our groups that way, so that we weren't just picking our friends, we were picking someone that we actually wanted in our group. So
Based on their skills.
based on their skills.
And I think, too, with that group, I love this project. Of course, it's like right up my alley with what I personally am interested in. But they could go to the opposite question of, what do you do for the kids that don't have a online presence? And that might be something to look at, too, in terms of getting them in a group with somebody who is all over Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or Vine or whatever they're currently on, so they can have that conversation. And probably the bigger question is, so what's that tell you about yourself if you don't have a presence?
That may be fun too.
Is it needed? Is that good or bad? I don't know, but I think you're going to have both extremes, and that might be something I think in the group dynamic. You don't want a group of 3 people and nobody has any social media presence.
Saying that's okay, not that one too.
But you know, to justify why you believe that.
Right.
So I think that might be, I don't know if that's an early on survey or whatever that is, but probably getting a sense. I think sometimes we assume everybody's online, and really there's not as many as what we might think, at least that are active, I think.
I don't know if, I'm glad students are here this time, because I don't know if this would be interesting to you, but maybe if he could have people come in and just talk to the class. Like, do companies really look at, Facebook pages and, have actual people come in and explain, I don't know, would that be something that would be interesting
That
to
would
you
be
guys?
really interesting to me because that's always been something that's on my mind. Even though I'm not online that much, but still, what if someone were to look at my Twitter when I'm trying to get a job, stuff like that.
And companies do. What they find is they're not looking for ways to not hire you, which is what most people think. They're looking for ways to hire you. Why does Mr. Hernandez stand out among Mr. Tritt, this job description? Not looking to say, what dirt can I find? But what is it? What separates you? Because if you think about it, The whole world is competing for the same jobs. So a resume looks the same to everybody. I mean, everybody can be an honor student. Everybody can be in the top 25% of their class. Everybody can take AP classes. Everybody can go to college and get a degree. Nobody cares about that. Those are the hoops you have to jump through. But what separates you from the others? That's the market. You have to have that entrepreneurial spirit anymore. I mean, if you're going for the big jobs that you really want. And so that's where I think that social media piece starts to come into play. You know, what is going on? What are they doing that separates them? And so it's a different mindset. They're not going through to say, do you have any party pictures of beer cans in your hand and hooting and hollering on the beach? They don't, but they're looking to say, why are you different from you? And that could be the deciding decision in a job hire.
Well, we always hear about the dirt.
The dirt sells.
It's not just getting a job, it's
Yeah.
it's getting suspended. It's
Or keeping your
actresses
job.
and actors,
Yeah.
people being ridiculed online because they say the wrong thing.
Yep.
You always have to be watching what you say.
Yeah.
You're-
And that's what you hear,
you're
yeah.
more active, more people see what you say.
Yeah. And it's interesting, this topic is really pretty relevant. Yesterday I was working with the Department of Ed, and this guy comes up to me and goes, so you're writing a book? And I was like, I don't even know who you are. And he had read my last blog post, which was an excerpt of my book. And basically I said, research is bullcrap. And I'm going, oh, man. Because the Department of Ed guy asked me about it, and I'm going, oh, man, where's this going to go? Because this guy is like the research guru of the Department of Ed. And I just basically said everything he does is garbage. But I think it raises a point to this topic of who is really looking at your stuff. There are lurkers. And there's people like, I didn't know this guy. Why is the Department of Ed reading my stuff? But he was, and that it made me very uncomfortable. So I think that whole lurker piece, who is looking at your stuff. I think the other interesting thing would be when you start talking about your digital profile too, I was starting to think, could kids distinguish between what I want versus who am I really? What do we share? Are those the things that we want in life? Or is this really truly who I am? And are those two separate identities, and what is it? You hear about like Facebook stuff all the time. People try to make their life look like it's perfect, and the people who share those perfect lives probably have the most miserable lives. People don't share the real stuff. And is there a difference? And why do we do that if we do that? I don't know. I'm hogging a lot of air, so I'm going to talk.
I saw this as a red flag. You said that it would be like a quarter long, but you'd work on it like 2 periods a week. Like for Choose to Matter, for instance, like I feel that we only work on it like once every 2 weeks, but I still feel that at sometimes I think like you can lose. I don't want to say like motivation, but like it's not. I mean, if you're working on it for like a week straight, that's going to be more powerful than working on it for 5 weeks, once a week.
It's a momentum killer,
Yeah.
is what we found out, yeah.
To like maybe have like a couple weeks like in that quarter where you can take like just like 1 week where it's like straight just working on the project so that you keep that motivation up.
So maybe not do the whole quarter, but maybe
Condense it down.
Yeah.
And then
that'd be
another thing that like how she said that either have it I'd say like 3 periods like a day or a week or whatever, or maybe even like 4, so that it's like you're always thinking about it, but you don't always have to be like in that project. You can be doing other things, but you still know that that's in the back of your mind, that you're still doing it. I know a lot of people with Choose to Matter, for example, forgot that they were even like, oh, right, Choose to Matter. Like, it just totally left their mindset. So there either needs to be like, remember that you have to have this done by this day or whatever, checkpoints on the board.
Right.
Remember that it's going on, or it needs to be a lot shorter. And if you're going to do like weekly, like Holly said, I put that towards the middle of the quarter or whatever, so that like with Choose to Matter, we had that like full day of just Choose to Matter. That was a little bit stressful. Yeah, it was towards the front though. You know what I mean? Or no, I guess it was in the middle of the semester. Was it?
It wasn't perfectly timed, no.
You know what I mean? I just felt
Right.
like we were having too much Choose to Matter in too short of a time
Right.
period, and then we like didn't do it for like the rest of it. It was just awkward. so I feel like you have to.
Well, there's a lot of momentum killers. I think by spacing it out, then we spent so much time transitioning to get our brains back into the groove. And by the time we got back in the groove, class period was over. I mean, so I think just trying to find that happy medium of where kids need time. But then it also almost have to realize when there's time to process to step away from it. Like I see like storyboarding the documentary, then you might just need a week away from the project just to kind of maybe go study documentaries, watch documentaries, figure out how to tell a story, how are you going to weave it, and then come back and then maybe have an editing session and work on the video, as opposed to going, here's your storyboard, tomorrow you record. Well, you may not be ready, so it's, you almost got to get a feel for the kids, and that's tough because that's now your whole curriculum is dependent on almost day by day of kids. But yeah, I mean, we learned probably every way to not do a long-term project with Choose to Matter. So we can share all the 37 ways of to not do.
One thing, I don't know if this would help at all, but his big question, how can I, help my students feel compelled to own the project? And then down under the project goals, the last thing kind of resonated with me to help students to be empathetic towards one another and other issues and everything. One thing I learned from my project tuning was it sounds like personal stories. Everyone has one to share, and those really resonate more with, I think, probably everybody. So maybe if he could find, even teenagers' stories of already what they've figured out about their own digital footprint, issues that they've had, or success stories that, I don't know if that would be helpful at all, but it might.
That's a good point, because there are people in the building who are very active, whether it's with their YouTube channel or with their Instagram. Or you looked at kid last year at Packard who actually got thousands and thousands of Instagram followers, and it's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
But you can bring in student specialists, as well as adult specialists to come in and present. And on different days, sprinkle it in there to how you bring it in. But just vary the age, and just different perspectives, I think would help the students, you guys.
That's what I was
See
trying
the
to
big
say.
picture.
All right, Jamie, we're going to let you jump in. We went 10 minutes, but I think we probably talk on this whole period, actually. But I'm going to make sure you've got time to respond. We'll give you 4 minutes here. What you heard, you can talk about specific points, things in general, where you plan on going, anything, just kind of where your brain is after listening to us.
Is there a chance for me to throw questions back, clarifying questions, or no?
You can. I mean, I think it's important. I think that's part of the adjustment actually to this project tuning is to get that part. So if you have questions, go for it.
I'm going to need a little bit of time to process that myself.
So maybe what were some ideas that you thought were good or you had to think about? I mean, what are you processing right now, just in general? You may not have an answer for it, but what are you?
I like the red flag about losing momentum for the project. In my mind, I was imagining it 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But I think it should be both. I really do. Where it should be definitely 3 times a week that you can count on we're going to work on our project, but also that I like the idea of having in the middle, we're going to have a week, and then probably towards the end when it's crunch time, I'd imagine that would be a time to need a week to make sure everything's ready to go. Probably 2 weeks in it where it's just, all right, we're going to really intently focus on making this happen. So I like the idea of having a balance between you can count on doing this on these 3 days and you can expect it. And this week we have a lot to do, so but not right at the start. Once we're rolling along and we have more to work with. Really interesting. I had not thought of I love the positive outlook that you came up with, Mr. Maurer, about how that really you're selling yourself and trying to show you're different, because it's the dark horror stories that stand out there. But I think it would be more uplifting and empowering for students to take more of the positive approach. That it's not be weary and I need to be afraid and, oh no, because I posted this and I'm 13 years old, I'm done for the rest of my life. I'll never go to college. But the choices I make today, they could help separate me from the rest. I think we definitely need to be aware of the potential pitfalls, but perhaps more of a shift in focus for how to sell yourself online would be a great starting point. I started seeing this in my mind more as a background. I started to see the project on one hand, I saw this as like, let's get some skills and let's have at it. But now I'm seeing it more of, let's take a little bit more time with background knowledge and let's do these questions. I think are great. I think kids would love to think about them as well. why like you were saying, do companies look at Facebook or Twitter? That would be interesting to you. If I would have someone come in. Or what is your online profile? How can you find that? Why does it matter? Does it matter? I think exploring those questions up front, making it more personal so students can explore their own relationship with the online world right off the bat, I think that would make the buy-in a lot higher. Okay, now that you know more about it and you're more aware of it yourself, let's go explore how this works in the real world. I love the idea as well of personal stories resonating with students, and particularly because there could be students in the school that people wouldn't even know about. Like, go look at these online superstars that we've got here right now, and what does that mean? I guess I want to throw this back out to you. What would be more interesting? Because that's the whole point. What would be more compelling? Would it be more interesting for students to explore their own online profiles and the importance of it, and being aware of it as a way to sell themselves, or would it be more interesting to explore the dangers of not being aware of what's online? What do you think?
I think that they focus a bit too much on like, oh, dangers. Like you can't be very careful because if you do this, like you're like you said, like you're done for it. But I think that it would be better if you focus more on how you can like make a good impression on the internet, and not so much on how like going on the internet is going to hurt you if you're not extremely careful.
I agree. It's going to be easier to focus on that negative, and I think that's where the shift is going to go initially. But spinning that is going to be a challenge for you, I think, because that is definitely more, I think you kind of phrased it earlier, where it's more of an impact. I think it's more uplifting.
Maybe the negative would be the hook. Like, it's a little bit fear-based. Yeah. This is the real world. But we don't want to stop there. We want to spin that. Okay, how can we make a good impression? Because I think if I were to start off class with how to make a good impression on the internet, I think whatever. Yeah. But I think if we look into the major problems with, or that could happen, bring people in, then it's okay. It's important to make a good impression. How could I do that? So with perhaps the documentary, then the focus would shift, and the point that I would assign, or at least suggest, would be the documentary would be teaching people how to be aware. What is an online profile? How can you make sure you have you said it really well. It's does trying to see where I wrote this down. Is what you're saying online, is it who you really are, and is it what you want it to say? And I think those are really good questions that could drive a documentary. In teaching people, raising awareness of what the online profiles say. Does it say what you want? How could you make that more in line with what you want?
And I think there's two really crucial issues. One, I just lost them both. One being that everything is being recorded, like nerdy Mr. Maurer with Google Glass. Your guys' future, like your guys' life, you don't know anything different than having a phone in your pocket, people taking pictures, putting things up, your selfies or Throwback Tuesdays or whatever it is. It doesn't mean like that's your world. It's different from us who didn't have that. And I think the adults have a natural fear of, oh my God, who's going to share what? Like, I think you guys think about it, but it's not ever present. Like every time, I still have it, and I'm an online junkie, but I'm still like, okay, how's this going to look? But you guys are like, my own kids are always, they're more online than on my profile than anybody else. Like they're just accustomed to this phone being around or Google Glass. Like people don't think twice about it. It's a different mindset for this generation. And so I think that very realization, like you're talking about, mistakes are going to be online, and people aren't going to judge that like our generation. Like we judge that because we spent a whole time trying to keeping those secrets, your family secrets, your mistakes hidden. That's only for your mom and dad and maybe your brothers and sisters to know. You guys share stuff all the time, and you don't care. I don't mean that in a bad way, and people don't care because we're human, and so it's a much different world. I always probably had this conversation with probably everybody in here. I would hate to have social media when I was a kid. I would have been that idiot that shared really, really bad things. I would have been that person. But I think growing up, like my kids it just doesn't matter. And I think that's such a powerful concept. It'll be interesting to see what comes out with kids. The other thing is new literacies. video and imaging is becoming the most important literacies. Obviously, reading and writing is important. I'm not knocking that, and that's always going to be there. But video and photo are the future. It's how people communicate. It's how people do everything. And if you read anything of what's coming down the pipeline, that is the future, not a document full of words.
And for me, that's the leap of faith because I'm comfortable with the research paper.
Yeah.
I'm not personally real comfortable with filming editing. I've done a little bit, but nothing. I mean, I am okay with my kids being significantly better than I am with that. But to do a documentary-based project, for me, is a gigantic leap of faith because it's way out of my comfort zone. But that is the reason why I did it, because that's how things are. That's how people process information. You go to the library, people aren't going to the classics. They're going to the DVD section. Or maybe put some today.
Right.
I like that word empathy that I saw two or three times in there too, because from our perspective, we know that kids can define empathy, but they don't practice it. And with the whole online piece, it becomes a whole new ballgame because they don't have to have empathy to press the send button. And so as they look at that, not being afraid of what they share, at the same time, we have to continue to teach them how to have empathy for what it says to somebody else.
Yeah, and I think the key piece, it goes like we talked about earlier, is I think students still forget that people can read anything. And so I think they blast those things out thinking, well, if I'm going to say something nasty about Mrs. Stones, only Mrs. Stones and maybe my immediate friends are going to see it, and we're going to laugh, and hopefully I hurt her feelings, and my friends think it's cool. They don't realize that I could jump on and see the whole entire thread if I really wanted to, or anybody could. And not that that should drive the empathy piece, but to realize that it's there and to be careful.
Kids that you feel empathy from body language and tone of voice and expression on their face, and with the whole digital thing, you don't have that.
Right.
And so we have to learn how to teach them to still feel that and practice it in a different way.
Right.
And when you're talking about that digital footprint, that's the way to bring that in, obviously.
Well, I thank you for your time. I think one thing I'm changing right